This episode is sponsored by our brand new book, This Naked Mind, Nicotine. I've co-written this book with author of Alcohol Explained, William Porter, and I combined our trusted approaches for controlling alcohol and bring these same science-backed, grace-led methods for all those who are ready to change their relationship with nicotine, vaping, smoking, chewing, whatever it is. We uncover the subconscious beliefs about smoking and vaping that keep us stuck in the same cycle. We ask thought-provoking questions and share exercises that spark clarity in your journey to kick the habit without willpower, without pain, without feeling like you're missing out, in an easier way that maybe you ever thought it was possible. So if you're ready to start healing your mind and body from the effects of smoking, you can pre-order your copy today at thisnakedmindnicotine.com.
Hello, everybody. It's Scott Pinyard, head coach at This Naked Mind, and I am back with another edition of Coaching Questions and another fantastic coach. Today, I am joined by Meade Shirley. How are you, Meade?
Hey, Scott. What's up? Glad to be here.
Good. So, we always ask people, what do you specialize in that we can kind of talk about so people get a flavor of it. And Meade said she's a reformed people pleaser and gray area drinker. She helps people escape the shackles of shame and helps them find the ability to create the life they want. I want to talk about multiple parts of this, but I really want to start with that thing right at the beginning, which is a people pleaser. I see this in so many people. This is something that I've struggled with. It's something that I see in a lot of our programs. So why don't you first tell me what a people pleaser is, and then tell me a little bit of your journey with it.
Yeah. So I agree. I see it everywhere too. Now that I do this work. So for me, it looked like people pleasing. I became a people pleaser at a young age because I'm an empath. I have heavy feelings. I'm sensitive. And in my family, my family was tense and heavy as it was. So that wasn't going to cut it. So I learned very early on to be light and funny and easygoing. And it became kind of, a survival, a survival personality, if you will. And I think what happens, so over time, you build this survival personality and you get positive response from people, from it. And it feeds that, I'm not being rejected because look, I'm whoever you want me to be, essentially. Yes. So very chameleon-esque, but very unconsciously. That is the thing that, I didn't even realize for so long that that's what I was doing. And years ago, I would have told you people pleasing was a strength of mine. It made me great in sales.
It's a good thing.
Yeah, it's a good thing. It made me great in sales. Very adaptable, but very flexible. But it keeps you from really, being your authentic self, really showing up as you are.
I always, when I talk about people pleasers, I like to, when I'm like in front of a crowd, I will say this just because it shocks people, but I think it rings true. People pleasers are liars.
I know. I was going to say, I know where you're going with that, because when I heard you say this for the first time, my reaction, I was like, oh no, like, yeah, that was harsh. And then I was like, yes, that is correct.
Well, it's funny because I find, so, you talk about taking on other people's feelings, which is it's something that obviously is available to all humans. Some of us tend to be more sensitive to it than others. And some of us tend to have a bigger level of responsibility for it, right? So like, I used to have this feeling that like, I came into a room and if someone was upset, like that was unacceptable. And I had to do what I had to do to help them. And so it's a weird thing to be effective with, because it feels like maybe it comes from a good place. Like, and like you said, I used to call it a strength. And it's like, oh yeah, I make people happy and I do this. The reason that I call people pleasers liars is that we do that in place of expressing how we're actually feeling. Yes. And I remember having a conversation with someone, this was years ago, about people pleasing and using that exact scenario. And same thing, like feeling like, no, I think it's a good thing. Like I have a lot of energy, I can be funny. And so like if someone's having a bad day, I can help them. And then the person asked me, Scott, what if you're having a bad day?
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah.
And I was like, well, I've never thought of it that way, and so it is something that I think for a lot of us, and I can clearly tie that to my drinking journey, that was a big motivator for me to drink, were those unresolved, unexpressed feelings that I was having, because in my head, I had this sense of over responsibility for other people, right? For other people's emotions. How does that compare to what you experienced, Meade?
Oh my gosh, 100%. And yeah, for me, it was this, if you're okay, I'm okay. So, if I could walk into a room wherever I was and, and read the room, figure out what people needed. If your needs are met, then hey, I'm good. And I had a similar question from a friend a few years ago when I started my intense personal growth journey. This is when my wine habit was becoming, more and more regular. And she's like, well, but what do you need? Like, you're so good at taking care and knowing what everybody else needs, but what do you need? And
Yeah.
I literally had this, what do you, I don't have any, like, I don't know. Like, it was so bizarre. I'm like, I don't know. Am I allowed to have needs?
Wait a minute. And it's funny too, because I think going another level deeper on this, like, you then, at least for me, what I started to experience was that if I then, because I was taking on that responsibility, if I then couldn't help that person shift,
Yes.
I almost felt bad. And
Oh,
sometimes I got mad at them, like, come on, dude,
sure.
like, lighten up, right?
Yeah.
And like these emotions are super confusing. We just don't realize that. But you talk about needs, it's almost like people pleasing becomes a need. And if they are not pleased, you're not okay.
Yeah. It's not, yeah, it's not separating the behavior from, making it mean something about me. And that was something that, yeah, for sure. I was very dependent on other people's reactions to me. You wouldn't have, I mean, this, knowing me, you would just think I was, easy to be around. I'm fun. I'm likable. I mean, it's so crazy how this kind of thing can play so unconsciously and so in the background. And it's exhausting, like I have this idea looking back of like how I was always putting on the tap shoes, not literally, but walking into a room and, jumping on stage and performing.
Absolutely.
Because I needed to win people over. I thought everybody was win overable.
Yes.
Everybody
Absolutely.
was an opportunity. Yeah.
And it's funny, and this is, I find, we can do this whole episode on people pleasing, but
Yeah.
like, I find that like that's actually true. And a lot of things when it comes to people pleasing, when you look at them at first, you're like, that's not a bad thing. Like, what's wrong with wanting people to be happy, right? And you're saying everyone's an opportunity to win over. Yeah, totally. Like, that seems true on its face.
And fun.
What's that?
And fun, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And it is. And I think for people like us, a lot of times we do get an emotional boost out of it. Like, I can say for sure, when I go on stage or I do a live and someone says thank you, or that really helped, like, that feels really good. The problem, I think, comes in when it goes from oh, this feels really good to, unless someone makes a shift, unless I see that person smile. And it becomes this binary thing where it's either I fulfilled my function of making this person happy or I didn't.
Yeah.
And I think that at that point is also when it kind of shifts, like our motives shift. Because now I can look at it and I can see, like, one of the biggest benefits, like one of the things I love the most is when I get on a call with the coaches or one of our path calls, all of us having a good time is really amazing. And I really like that. But back then I thought it was my job.
Yeah.
Right? It was my job. It was my job to do that. And it's very tricky in that way, kind of insidious, I think.
Yeah, and all the work that I did on it too, what really helped me was understanding that it comes from a place of fear, which it always does, right? It always comes back to fear. That kind of personality develops out of a fear of being rejected. Yes. And so it keeps us hiding who we really are, because who we really are, we've deemed not good enough, which is where the shame comes in. So and what does shame want us to do? It wants us to hide it. So then, we adapt in that way and live in this very constrained fear space, which creates this, I was caught in this hustle of doing more, serving more, being more, pleasing more, all of achieving more so that I could be more. Like I had to prove, but then at the same time, I was using wine to quiet the chaos of that hustle and the shame of not feeling like I'm good enough and truly,
Yeah.
learning to just being me. It's not it's not the doing. It's not conditional on doing things for other people. It's just being me. But that took a lot of time. And then once you are comfortable being you, you don't need the wine that helps you deal with the fallout of trying to be what others want you to be. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And I feel like this whole idea of needs and like what we need as humans, that's not to go too deep with this, but like negative emotions point toward very often, some sort of unmet need or some sort of thought about how the world should be. And it's not that way. And so I feel bad, conscious or subconscious thought. And what happens to us over time with drinking, right, is like that first time we have a drink because we're really stressed, like, oh man, I need a drink, right? We say this stuff and then, oh, I feel better immediately. I'm doing air quotes, but like, well, the stress does feel better. But over time, what happens is alcohol becomes a solution to all of our problems. And then we don't really, if that's the case, if you have one solution to all of your problems, you don't really need to define the problem that well, right? All you need to do at that point is just be like, there's a problem. I know what to do. And what I find as a really interesting part of the journey for people pleasers is that they already have this built-in sort of neglect of their own needs and their own emotions, right? Because we've been doing it. We've been ignoring those for the sake of others for so long. So this journey of going alcohol free and removing that one tool reveals, hey, there's more work to do. And what's amazing about that is seeing people come into their own, seeing people say, oh, you know what? I don't really like serving on that church community or the PTA, and like quitting and feeling good about it. Like
no to things.
Did you experience any of that? I'd love to hear a little bit about that.
I did. Yeah. So there's so many things that you just said there that I'm like, yep. Completely my story too. I thought wine made me a better mom. So like my thinking is I need to be a better mom. I need to be a better wife. I need to be a better friend, I thought wine made me better at all those things, but guess what? Those things were directed at like other people too. So there's that one part, right? And then there's that other part of, well, but, is it really making me a better mom, a better wife? Because it takes the edge off. It takes my edge off, So I thought it relaxes me. It makes me more enjoyable to be around. This is kind of the story that, has always been in my head. If I'm easy, I'm light, I'm funny, I'm, the life at the party, then the deeper message goes to that I'm likable, I'm lovable, I'm acceptable. And so it all feeds into that. And that was very much part of my alcohol free, becoming alcohol free and looking back going, oh my gosh, no, it didn't help with any of those things. It actually made those things worse. And that's what this naked mind, the methodology of this naked mind, that's what makes it, come to light and to actually see the truth of that. Wait a minute, no. I wouldn't need to take an edge off. I wouldn't have an edge if I wasn't drinking wine. Wine is actually causing the edge.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. I actually have one of the questions I have for this week points right to that. So I'd be curious to hear your answer to this, but let me read the question. It is this: I have a friend group that seems to be almost defined by drinking. Every activity we do involves booze. It's usually some form of, let's go here because they have a playground for the kids and we can sit outside and drink, fill in the blank.
Yes.
I love my friends. We really have a good time, but the problem comes in when I go home and keep drinking all night. I feel like I start and then can't stop. So I know that it can change, but I don't want to abandon my friends. And I'm afraid I'll make them feel uncomfortable if I don't drink. Help.
Oh my gosh, I could have written that question, 5 years ago. 100% could have written that question. I'm having flashbacks to play dates when they were little, when the kids were super little and we were doing, drinking wine spritzers, sometimes without the spritzer, like just, like everything revolved around. And for us, we have a really tight social group in our neighborhood, and it's the same thing. It's, hey, let's get together, let the kids run around, and everything, mom's nights out, this and that. I know that being the people pleaser, in retrospect, that needing to belong, which by the way is a basic human desire. Like everybody has basic human desires to feel safe, to feel loved, to belong. And so for me, it was part of that, having a lot of friends and having a good social network and social connections. That was very, very important to me. And so when I started realizing that wine was absolutely getting in the way of everything that I valued, everything that I really wanted deep, meaningful connection. It was getting in the way of that. And my fear about, entering a life of alcohol free, my fear was that I would lose that. The biggest fear
Absolutely
was losing that social connection. And what I've learned on this side, the irony of it is that, I actually, the people pleasing, the fitting in, that you do, it requires you to change to be something, to be part of that social group. Where true belonging comes from just being who you are. You don't have to change a thing. But, so the long answer of this is, I still have the same friends. The one thing that I was afraid of never came to fruition, that I would lose this social connection because of the alcohol, when really it has deepened all my connections with my friends because it's not in the way.
It's so true. And it seems really scary. And the particular word here was, or the phrase here was, making your friends uncomfortable. And that's why I pulled this question, because I'm like, I see a little people pleasing here. It's also, by the way, a very convenient excuse to keep drinking. Well, I can't quit drinking because I have, this play date next week, and we're gonna, but the reality of the situation, and this is a tough lesson, I think, for people pleasers to really take on, and live from. Other people's emotions are their responsibility, right? It's not ours. And where I see a lot of times this question comes from a people pleasing place, and we get versions of this sort of question all the time, where it's like, well, I don't want to make people feel uncomfortable, and then they won't hang out with me. And so there's kind of like two sides to it, right? There's like that initial side that it's somehow your fault how someone else is feeling. And then the second one is, I don't want to be lonely. I don't want to be alone. And I 100% agree with you on the I don't want to be alone thing, that like those connections come when you remove alcohol. Like my friend, I can honestly say I am better friends with my friends than I was when I was drinking. They're still drinking, right? But we've changed how we connect. But understanding that, like, look, there's a very good chance, there's a very good chance that if you drink too much, so do your friends, right? We hang out with people that are like us. And I think we all know this, in the back of our minds. But when one person makes that change, it can kind of have the impact of holding up a mirror and getting other people to be like, oh man, well, if Meade's drinking too much, and I mean, like, I hang out with her every Saturday, what does this mean? And what I have to say to that part of it is, that's part of the process. And our job in that situation is not to preach. Like, you don't have to be that annoying, sober friend that's like, that's going to give you cancer, right? Like, you don't have to do that.
That does not work, by the way.
It totally doesn't. Side note on that, I had someone in one of our classes one time say, I was so blown away that alcohol causes cancer. I didn't know this. And so I started telling everyone I know. And I said to her, I'm like, so how'd that work out? And she's like, no one's hanging out with me anymore. So you don't have to do that, right? And what's really nice about having this connection, and the fact that these friends, is that you can just say, a version of, it wasn't serving me, or whatever that is, and then move on. And because you have that established connection, you can do that, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and I find if I don't make it a big deal, then it's not a big deal. But it does take that, okay, yeah, I'm not here to, that's not my job. I'm retired from people pleasing, so it's not my job to make sure everybody else is comfortable. I am here, and I've got my Pellegrino or my alcohol-free wine or whatever it is. And if it makes someone else uncomfortable, that's on them. Because I don't have the space anymore to do it all. But
So I want to ask you directly, like, how did you go through that transformation, right? Like we can talk about the concept that it's their responsibility, but I'm really curious because we get a lot of questions about this. So how did you go from, oh man, I'm so worried that I need to make everyone feel good, to be like, you know what, I'm going to be me, and their reaction is their own?
that is such a good question. And I wish I had a really like step one, step two, step three. Of course, it's not that simple, right? But for me, I think the thing, because I was, like, and it's so funny because two of my kids are this way too. Like their currency is social isolation. So if they ever, get in trouble for anything, we can just send them to their rooms, and they're like, "Oh, this is terrible."
Yeah.
That's always, and I'm like, I wonder where they get that from. I have always been the person that I like to be around people. I do not like to be alone.
I'm with you.
And so, when my girlfriend that one time was like, what does Meade need? Because, I was in a place where, I knew something was up. I had this low-grade irritability going on. I knew that I was drinking when I didn't want to be drinking, and I was drinking when I wanted to be I was drinking more and less at the same time. It was there was such an internal conflict. And so for me, she was like, have you ever tried like meditation? I'm like, that's woo-woo. That's not for me. She's like, no, just like being still, being by yourself. And for me, it was a really hard sell, but for me, it looked like trying, like literally out of desperation, just, getting in my car and driving to work for the first 5 minutes, not getting on the phone to anybody, not turning on a podcast, not turning on music, driving in silence, being still, being present, being quiet, being alone. That 5 minutes turned into this practice of being able and wanting to start my day every day alone, silent, still, tapping into me. And I have a lot of friends who ask this, and I help them with this, and they're like, yeah, but when you sit in that stillness, you have to be prepared for what you're gonna find. That's scary. And I said yes, and it was scary, and it can be, but all the answers to all the things, all of them, are inside of us. And I had no idea that it was all within me. And so it started with a just simple being present. I have this like idea of my, 30 plus years of my life. I was running through life, just dragging my body behind me,
Yes.
just always hustling, moving to the next thing, just surviving, dragging my body behind me. And then really, really stopping, being still, being in silence, stillness, solitude, started the meditation practice, contemplative prayer. That was huge for me in going, okay, there's some inner wisdom here, and I'm going to rest in that. So now so I know that's still kind of a giant.
No, it's a great answer. Yeah.
But it truly started with, okay, like, let me start with me and just be curiosity, being open to what is there, not judging. It's the same thing we do with looking at our alcohol relationship. It's getting curious. It's putting down the weapons and the criticism, the judgment, and just being open to what is there.
It's huge. And I think, another one thing for me that was really big, and this sounds super silly, but I did it because I needed it, is I set alarms on my phone that literally, like, that went off periodically throughout the day. And they asked me, how do you feel? What do you need? So my alarm would go off on my phone, and I'd look at it and it would say, what do you need? And it was really a reminder, because we just become so disconnected, right?
Yeah.
People pleasers. But then if you add alcohol on top of that, we become so disconnected that we end up in this space where, like, I don't know, like when your friend asks you that question, it's like, how is that? What are you talking about? Right.
Yeah.
You're just so,
it's a foreign language. I don't even know what you're saying. What are those words that are coming out of your mouth? I don't know. Yeah.
Absolutely. And those things that you find in that quiet time in the morning, or if you use the alarm thing, however you do it, however you get in contact with that.
I did the same thing with learning to breathe. Like, I had to learn how to breathe, and I would set an alarm on my phone to remind myself to breathe, because I was holding my breath for
Mhm.
30 some years, holding my breath, just, so, just waiting trying to be prepared for whatever might, come my way. But really,
Yeah.
it's the breathing and the being and the stillness. That's where all the truth is.
And it's such a huge step forward when we start to recognize that stuff. And
Mhm.
then sometimes it's in conflict, right? Sometimes you want to do something and your husband wants to do something else, or you like it's, and so we find these things.
Yeah.
And what I really liked about what you said is like the answers are inside. Like and I believe this very strongly, that we have these answers, right? We have the ability to navigate whatever is put in front of us. We might not have confidence that we do. That's a separate issue, but there is
Totally.
the fact
Yeah.
that we have it. And just getting in touch. Like I remember I was coaching someone one time, and she was telling me, we were doing this needs work, and she was telling me like, oh man, like I think I need to quit my job. I think I need to do this. And she's like, what do you think? And I'm like, good. And she goes, what? And I'm like, well, clearly like there was a situation going on that wasn't working for you and you were ignoring it. Now you know it, right? Now you know it. And that makes a huge, massive difference in how you're going to be able to operate and where you're going to be able to go. Yeah.
Yeah, bringing that conscious awareness to something. That's the other thing. I feel like we, as moms, as women, as humans, we just get caught in the unconscious living, the sleepwalking, autopilot, go 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 go.
Yeah.
And so bringing consciousness to, yeah, how am I feeling? What do I need? And giving ourselves that. Annie talks about this too. We're humans, and we were never taught how to be humans.
Yes, we weren't.
No one was
That's
given
totally true.
a guidebook on how to be a human, and so learning how to do that
Yeah.
is something you just have to stay open and curious to, and yeah.
It's almost like someone should write a book about it.
Almost. I know. I hope there's one coming.
The idea, and by the way, I want to point out too, that happens to guys as well. I think we might focus on different things, but there's like, achievement and family and that sort of stuff that the number of people, so I'm 40 right now, and the number of my friends that I have talked to who reach like 35, 40, and it's kind of like, what is that Talking Head song? Well, how did I get here?
Yeah.
I can't remember the name of the song. Anyway, but like they kind of look around and they're like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing.
Yes.
Like, what happened?
Yeah.
And that happens when we get disconnected. And yeah, anyway, so this is very good. I'm going to go on. Let's do one more question.
Yeah. Okay.
We have time for that. I knew I was going to spend the whole time talking about it. I love people pleasing and working on that because I think there's so much there. But let me read you another question. And it goes like this. I've spent so much time helping others, whether it's my kids or the people at work, that I almost don't really know who I am, with one big exception. I've become the wine person. I know all about it, and I've become that person that people come to and ask about it. Now that wine has become a problem for me, I'm not sure who I'll be if I quit, and this scares me. How can I approach this in a way that feels better for me?
Yeah. Oh man, I can relate so much to that. And that's so that can be so overwhelming to have that, oh my gosh, yeah, who am I separate from? I mean, for me, it was, who am I separate from being party Meade? Like,
Mm-hmm.
is there anything there? And I think the again, kind of going back to the just finding that stillness and starting to tap into, just starting by being alone with yourself, I think is a good way to kind of start the process. But also understanding that you by examining your identities and the labels that we put on ourselves, like those come from stories about, our brains make interpretations of things. We have facts and we have truth, and then our brains go and they interpret and they analyze and they assess and they, make these stories. And those stories, although they feel completely true, like that's all there is, like I'm only the wine girl, that's all there is to me, it's not, and so being able to again use the curiosity and the
Yes.
openness and the no judgment and kind of going, okay, what is there? What are some of my other identities? And then being able to say, are these true? I mean, I run that through how many times a day do I say, what is the story I'm telling myself? Is it true? And then I usually follow with, how does it make me feel and how does it make me behave? And that is the formula for being able to create intentionally any outcome for your life. Truly
Yeah.
creating, you can intentionally create that by using that.
I love that. Is this true? It is something I feel like we should all be asking
Is it
all
true?
the time. Yeah, anytime, especially when big emotions come up, right? When something like anger or sadness or that, like very often there's a meaning there that's just out of sync, a story that's out of sync with reality. Um,
And a
when I
lot
read,
of, sorry, go
what's that?
ahead.
No, go
No,
ahead.
no, I was gonna say, and a lot of times I have found, like, for the people pleasers, it's the sadness, the anger, the whatever, but it's the resistance to that emotion that's compounding that need
Mhm.
to escape, that need to take the edge off, because not only are we having the emotion, but that is deemed, negative. And by the way, we've made it negative. Our brains have just made it negative. Feelings are neutral until we make them bad. But then it's that resistance that comes in going, no, no, this is bad. I don't want to feel this way. And
Yes.
we create this, it's just kind of this big old stew of stress that keeps us from being able to kind of see clearly. I mean, really, truly, it activates our stress hormones,
Mhm.
releases adrenaline and cortisol. The amygdala kicks in there and physiologically causes a stress reaction in that resistance.
Yes, it's so true. And like one thing, when someone asked me, so when I first read this question, I thought of an exercise that is both scary and super beneficial for someone in this position. Um, and it is to actually ask people around you, like people that are close to you, who am I to you? And
Yes.
it's, obviously you don't want to like ask your boss or like someone you're not necessarily close with, but like, this lady says her kids and her job. So I'm wondering if her kids are grown, like asking your kids this question, but like we spend so much time in our own heads living our own lives because, well,
Mhm.
that's all we can do, but we completely lack the perspective that other people have. And so asking them can feel scary, right? It can be like, oh,
Yeah.
I don't know about this, it makes me nervous and it makes me maybe uncomfortable. But it is so enlightening to do that, because when you do that, you get to see yourself reflected through someone else.
Yeah.
That starts to tell you a story about who you are to other people, because there's going to be this idea of who we define ourselves are, and that's going to be heavily focused on what we focus on. So like if I quit my coaching job tomorrow and I went and I did nothing but play guitar badly, but it wouldn't matter, because over a period of a couple of months I'm going to really be like, oh, I'm a guitar player, right? The point I'm making is that this is malleable. What isn't as malleable is what other people see around us, and so asking that question can be a game changer.
So it's funny you say that, because we just did that in our Onawa and I have a group program, and we just did that as part of who am I? It's
Yeah.
asking your loved ones, how they see you and letting them be that mirror image for you, letting them reflect back, because we see ourselves totally differently. And, another thing that I always have my clients do as part of people pleasing or not is a values exercise. Get in touch with what your values are, because a lot of the conflict we feel that creates that stress and that need to, take the edge off with alcohol, a lot of that comes from, our values not being aligned with our actions. And so a really good way to tap into who are you? Well, what do you value?
Yeah.
Where do you spend your time and your money? And for me, that was really scary, because I'm like, oh, well, I'm spending it drinking. And if I'm not drinking, it's the thinking about drinking.
Yep.
Like, I'm,
Or recovering. Yeah.
recovering from drink, all of that, or beating myself up or whatever. So a values exercise can be really, really helpful for that too, because that shows you where that, misalignment is.
The one thing that I love about questions like this is that well, it's funny because as people come to me with, or us with these questions, and it's like they're upset about it. To me, That is massively exciting, right? The fact that someone has recognized, wait a minute, I feel like I'm defined as this, but I don't feel that way. Like that means they're literally on the threshold of change. Like they're about to
He's
do
already
something.
asking the questions. That's
Exactly.
huge.
Yes. Awesome. All right. We got to wrap it up, but not without a curveball question.
All right,
so Meade, I have a question for you.
Bring it.
You quit your job as a coach and become a singer. What would the name of your debut album be?
Oh my gosh. That's really funny though, because my kids would be dying right now because I am so tone deaf. It's hilarious. My daughter can sing beautifully, and I'm like, let me come join you. She's like, please, Mom, no. I love to sing, but I can't carry a tune. Well, so the first thought that comes to my head is sober as a mother, but I don't use sober as a word. So alcohol free as a mother, but that just doesn't have the same ring. But that's just straight without giving it any thought. That's what comes to mind.
I love it. That's
so
awesome.
maybe we have to play with it a little bit.
Hey, there's people at your recording studio, there's marketing people that can help you with that, but I like it.
Yeah. Oh, good one.
So Meade, thank you so much for hanging out with me today. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you for having me. Yeah, this was awesome. Let's do it again.
And if people want to find more information on you or how to get in touch with you, how can they do that?
Sure. Yeah. So my website is meadehollandshirley.com. It's a nice short little URL for you, but meadehollandshirley.com, MEADE hollandshirley.com.
Awesome. And if you guys liked what you hear today, I highly recommend checking out Meade's website, set up a discovery call. She's great to work with.
I'd love to talk to you. Yeah.
Awesome.
Thanks, Scott. This is so fun.
Thank you. And thank you to those of you listening. I will be back again soon with another edition of Coaching Questions. And until then, take care.
Here's a question I get asked often. Annie, do you think your science-backed, grace-led approach to alcohol could work for other things, like nicotine? People have asked me this question for years, and the answer is a resounding yes. And finally, there's a book for that. William Porter, the author of Alcohol Explained, and I have joined forces to bring you This Naked Mind Nicotine. We've combined our proven habit-breaking systems that help thousands overcome alcohol without willpower, without pain, without missing out, to help people quit smoking and vaping the same way without the pain. So start your no nicotine journey today by pre-ordering This Naked Mind Nicotine at thisnakedmindnicotine.com. And as always, rate, review, and subscribe to this podcast, as it truly helps the message reach somebody who might need to hear it today.